Hello, fellow badass Benzo superheroes. It's Debbie. I am still currently holding on my clonazepam. If you're interested in my story and how I got here, that's all the way back in my first video, which you can find on my channel. Anyway, so today's topic is the long promised childhood trauma and how that affects those of us going through benzo withdrawal. Before I get to that, though, I have a question. And that question is, are you going to make it through this process? Well, that was kind of a trick question because the answer is yes, you are. How do I know this? Well, let's just try to get some perspective. So these nasty ass drugs have been prescribed for decades and decades and decades, all the way back to the 60s. And so honestly, at this point in time, millions, probably billions of people have been on these drugs, which means millions and maybe billions of people have successfully gotten through this. Now, I am not saying that I don't have days where I'm like, I'm different. Not me. I'm never going to get through it. I'm going to be permanently damaged. Yeah, I have those thoughts. But the reality is that millions and millions, and again, probably billions of people have gotten through this. So our odds are really, really good. And at the end of the day, I had this thought today. I wrote it down. Um, and this is honestly the reality of it. The only thing that's going to stop me from getting through this is me giving up. So, anyway, that's my quasi pep talk for the day. So moving on to childhood trauma. Let me just first say I'm not a doctor, I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a counselor. Um, I am just someone that started counseling a few months ago, um, and I've done a lot of reading and research. And in fact, I've linked some really good articles below if you want to do some further reading on this. And again, through counseling, I have discovered really how much this childhood trauma and PTSD has affected my benzo tapering. So, as I mentioned in earlier videos, I started counseling because I just really felt like I needed another support system because I was tired of talking to my friends and family about it. And honestly, I think most of them are pretty tired of hearing about it. So that's initially why I started counseling. And then through several weeks, you know, I, I, I came to understand and accept that my childhood trauma really was adversely affecting me, not just the benzos, but really my whole life. And, I, up to that point, had really been steeped in denial, which is incredibly powerful because I felt like I was always really high functioning as an adult. And I always kind of had an attitude of, well, yeah, all these awful things happen, but, I'm over it and I'm good. And, I just went on with my life. But again, through counseling, it's just really opened my eyes. And again, in some of these articles, what I've learned is that childhood trauma literally changes the physical structure of our brains. Not to mention the fact that it literally changes the way our brains function. So I have some notes over to the side of my screen, and I'm going to do some reading because I don't want to forget anything because it's all really, really important. So, the traumatized brain looks different from non traumatized brains in three very important ways. Number one, the PFC or the prefrontal cortex or the thinking center, which is located near the top of your head behind your forehead, is actually underactivated. Um, Now, that part of our brain is responsible for things like rational thought and problem solving. So, if it's underactivated or it's not working properly, and then you take a look at, benzo withdrawal, at least for me, because again, I can only speak for myself. When I think about rational thought and problem solving, that's been a problem for me in benzo tapering, because I don't have a lot of rational thinking. Again, it goes back to that, I'm never going to make it through this. It's me. I'm never going to heal. Blah, blah, blah. All those awful thinking thoughts. And then problem solving. I've got videos on YouTube here that talks about all my mistakes, because in that search to problem solve this process of withdrawal, I've not always made the greatest decisions. So the second area that has been affected is called the ACC, and that is the Emotional Regulation Center. It's located next to the prefrontal cortex, but it's deeper inside the brain, and it is also underactivated. So when this region is working properly or it's strong, we're able to manage difficult thoughts and emotions without becoming totally overwhelmed. And I don't know about you, but I feel pretty overwhelmed most of the time. And then the third way, which I think is probably the most important or impactful part of our brain that's been changed and affected, and for me, I think causes the biggest problems in benzo withdrawal, is the amygdala. And that's a tiny structure deep inside our brain, and it is underactivated. Um, and actually, in traumatized people, it's smaller than in non traumatized people. So, its primary job is to receive all incoming information, everything you see, hear, touch, smell, taste, feel, um, and answer one question: is this a threat? And if it detects that a dangerous threat is present, it produces fear. And also that fight or flight response, those adrenaline rushes, all those horrible anxious feelings, panic attacks. That's the thing that's responsible for all that. Um, and so, in other words, if you were traumatized as a child, even without going through benzo withdrawal, you're going to have chronic stress, hypervigilance, lots of fear, irritation. I can be a total freaking bitch frequently. Um, so, basically, we just have a really hard time feeling safe, or being able to calm ourselves down, affects our sleep. So again, you can see that going through childhood trauma, even without going through benzo withdrawal, creates all kinds of difficulties for people. And then you put benzo withdrawal on top of it, and it makes it even more difficult. Some of the things that I do a lot is, the hypervigilance. I'm doing full body scans all the time. What am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? Is it benzo withdrawal, or is it a tumor? Is it cancer? Is it, that? And it's the fear. I experience a lot of fear and panic. And, for me, I think this is just another level of understanding what's going on inside of my body. And there's some comfort in that, because, I realize that it's not just me, that there are other factors that are contributing to what's making this even more difficult, for me to get through this tapering thing. So, couple things that I want to say, which I think is also important, because even though this sounds like a lot of doom and gloom, it's like, oh, great, thanks, Deb, for sharing all that. I'm even more messed up than I already thought I was. There's actually hope in this, and one of those is that for a very, very long time, scientists, neuroscientists, psychiatrists thought that our brains were, just kind of static. That, we were born with genes, these blueprints, and we just were the way we were, and the brain, just doesn't change. And they've come to find that that's absolutely not true. The brain is very plastic. It has what's called plasticity. And in a nutshell, what that means is it heals, which is awesome news. Not only can you heal from childhood trauma and PTSD, but we can heal the trauma that's been done to our brain by these benzos. Um, so, is it easy? No. It's like anything in life, it's going to take time, and it's going to take commitment, and it's going to take work. Um, so, would I advise, you know, doing counseling while you're going through this, especially trauma counseling or counseling for PTSD? I cannot answer that for you. Only you can answer that for you. And that's got to be your choice, because it's hard work. Um, and again, for me, it's just adding on another thing for me to deal with. But for me, um, I've chosen to do it because I feel like if I can deal with the trauma and the PTSD, that in some way, hopefully, it will make the benzo withdrawal process easier. And also, when I get to the other side of this, because I know that I will, not only am I going to be done with this horrible process, and feel wonderful, but I'm going to be mentally healthier too. And so, if that's what I want, then I need to do this work. So something that I'm doing in counseling, it's called brain spotting, and I'm not going to get into it. If you want to know more about it, search it on YouTube. There's some great videos out there. And I'm going to tell you that I went into brain spotting. It's with a lot of skepticism. I'm just kind of that person. It's like, prove it to me. Um, but there's a lot of research on it, and it's been incredibly effective with trauma and PTSD. And it's a process that you go through, and oh my God, I've experienced some things that I never would have believed um, would happen. And it has just made a remarkable difference for me. And so now I'm a huge advocate of it. Is it easy? No, it's tough. It's really hard. But one of the things that brain spotting does is it gets right to your subconscious brain, and it helps release trauma. Because the thing with trauma is that we actually store it in our bodies. If you look at wildlife videos and you see a gazelle that's been chased by a lion and then it gets away, and you watch that gazelle, it will literally stand and shake for quite a bit of time, and then it's fine. And that is just the body's way of releasing the trauma. Well, as human beings, we don't do that. We have a tendency to just kind of stuff that stuff. And so we walk around with that trauma in our bodies. And there's a ton of research out there that shows when you're walking around with a lot of trauma in your body, it comes out sideways. It comes out in all kinds of ways, cancers and heart disease and just all kinds of things. So, again, brain spotting is just a particular modality that's really good at releasing that trauma. So, if you don't want to do counseling, you don't feel like you're ready, to take that on. And again, I totally understand that. There are other ways that you can help yourself. If you've been watching my videos, you know that I am a giant advocate of paying attention to your words and your thoughts. And again, why is this so important? Well, especially in traumatized brains, you have to remember that we went through trauma, and what we have done in our adult life basically is, we just have created all of these highways and roads and neural pathways in our brain that have created all of these beliefs and patterns of behavior. And the only way that you're going to change those is with new thoughts and new behaviors. And that in turn creates new highways, new neural pathways. And so, you know, there's just a plethora of videos out there. Joe Dispenza, I've talked about this in other videos um, on ways to just start being aware of your thoughts and your words and changing them, especially when it comes to benzo withdrawal. I was rethinking about this the other day, the verbiage that I use, referring to this as withdrawal, which is such an ugly word that has so many negative connotations. So, I've really tried to recommit to, calling it side effects or responses that I have, because just changing those words just changes, I think, the way that my body even reacts to what I'm saying. So, again, if you have any comments or thoughts or things that you want to share, your own experiences, please feel free to leave a comment below. And if you, again, are interested in any new videos that I make, I wish that I could commit to, I'm going to make a video every week. But as you well know, sometimes I go weeks and, it's like all I can do to get through the day, let alone make a video. But I do try to make them on a regular basis because my goal in these videos is to educate and to offer hope and to give quasi pep talks. So please subscribe to my channel. Turn on notifications so that when I do make new ones, you'll be notified. So thank you so much. Again, I send out a tremendous amount of love and prayer for rapid healing. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And giant hugs. And thank you so much for watching. And I hope that you have a wonderful day. Thank you.